Greetings shippers, welcome back, and today we need to talk about Tumblr. This is going to be a complicated one, so get ready because it's also probably going to be long because there's a lot to discuss. So before we get started, if you haven't already, please do follow on social media to stay up to date, know when we're streaming, and just come on over and chit chat about fandom. It's a good time, I swear, even when we're talking about stuff like this. For those who have not been keeping up to date on their Tumblr news or are simply not involved in the platform, there is, at the time of this recording, which is December 2018, a massive purge looming on the horizon. As of December 17th, 2018, Tumblr is planning to ban all not safe for work content. All of it. This is set to occur regardless of the age of the person using the site. Tumblr released a blog post detailing these changes to its policy, some of the highlights of which include: adult content will not be allowed on Tumblr regardless of how old you are. Photos, videos, or GIFs that show real-life human genitals or female-presenting nipples and any content that depicts sex acts. Some exceptions include: exposed female-presenting nipples will still be allowed in connection with breastfeeding, birth, or afterbirth moments, and health-related situations, such as post-mastectomy or gender confirmation surgery. While it has been claimed that fan content is still allowed, many have found their accounts purged. All of this will replace Tumblr's safe mode, which was a feature one could turn on so that they did not see not safe for work content. It would appear pixelated or with a message that would say that this content was explicit, and you would have to then approve whether you would see it or not. Some felt that this was already enough, others clearly not so much. There is a lot of furor and fear surrounding this decision, especially because people feel that it will be misimplemented, and indeed it already has been. We know there will be mistakes, but we've done our best to create and enforce a policy that acknowledges the breadth of expression we see in the community.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Despite claims that there would be an appeals process, that creators would be notified by email should their accounts be about to be purged, and that they would have time to download all of their content and back it up, that has already not been the case. Just like any purge before it, creators have awoken to find massive archives completely deleted, gone, and not everybody has them backed up. So before we dive further into what exactly is going on, we need to address the what and the why. Firstly, we need to address what exactly is Tumblr, because for those who are heavily involved in it and invested, it is hard to believe that not everybody uses the site. Indeed, in some circles, Tumblr has an extremely bad reputation, which is part of why there has been such a mixed response to this. There are some who are extremely angry, some who are ambivalent, and some who are actually happy. So to examine all of that, we need to get a better foundation as to what exactly Tumblr is. Tumblr was founded in 2007 by David Karp. It is a microblogging social media website designed for the rapid-fire sharing of content. Any content, initially at least. While the site has become known as a fandom hub for artwork, fics, just various creations, it's actually much more than that. Indeed, you can find a Tumblr blog about just about anything. There are Tumblr blogs for coffee, knitting, various kinks. If you can think of it, somebody probably has a Tumblr about it. However, those are more difficult to discuss, and indeed Tumblr needed a universal identity, something that it could be identified by, and one of the loudest proponents on the site is the fan community. As a result, that tends to be what is discussed when one talks about Tumblr, barring some exceptions, although as is usually the case with Tumblr, when people are discussing it, it is not always for the best of reasons. This is largely because Tumblr did give the creators upon it the chance to upload pretty much anything they could think of. Sometimes this was not intentional and instead was because of Tumblr's format. Tumblr was designed as a bunch of miniature blog pages that people could then reblog and share very quickly so that content could be spread. Many people will cite that the best years of Tumblr were the early 2010s. This is despite a change in dashboard that occurred in 2011, giving users the modern dashboard that most Tumblr users will recognize today. This change at the time was mixed, and there are still those who feel that it was a bad idea. The change was made so that people could balance multiple accounts at once, because more and more Tumblr users were having multiple accounts for different things as they diversified what they were posting. Instead of having one main account where one posted everything, if one was, for example, say in multiple fandoms, they may have multiple accounts. And just to be able to see a wider array of what was going on Tumblr. The downside is that this made it much more difficult to track. There are many who claim that Tumblr is a very organized fandom hub. However, that is not necessarily the case, and definitely has not always been as easy as it even is today. Tumblr does not have the most intuitive interface, and many blame the dashboard change on this. If one is not familiar with Tumblr's tagging system and how exactly to navigate it, it can be very confusing for new users. It can also make it hard to find previous posts, especially if one is not a regular user and instead more casual. This is what leads to things happening very quickly on Tumblr. Something will be posted and all of a sudden the idea will be everywhere, spitballing. This can be a very positive thing for fandom, however. As a result, there can be ideas, headcanons, fics, things that just proliferate very quickly and spread to more people than they ever would have in another circumstance. This meant that as Tumblr gained popularity, it also gained notoriety, but at the time in a positive sense, as a space where fans could share and create anything and get it seen. It must be noted here that Tumblr was not actually designed to be a fandom hub. Karp built the site because of his interest in microblogging and wanted to introduce his own microblogging platform amidst a sea of blogging platforms. As in the early days, this was the rise of the consolidated archive. Before this, it was much more common to have individualized archives for specific fandom niches, a website for Buffy, a website for Buffy fan art, a website for Buffy Fics, all spread across different hosting forums. Platforms such as Tumblr provide the unique opportunity to now house all of these things in one place. It is at this time that we also see the rise of sites such as LiveJournal and fanfiction.net, both of which would have significant purges in the years to come and had already had some a few years prior. As a result, it made Tumblr seem like a much safer haven for more not safe for work material, which was what was being purged off of the other major up-and-coming sites. This colored how some came to view Tumblr and what Tumblr was for, and Tumblr for some came to be viewed as a safe space. This of course comes into play later when it comes to the outrage that is being expressed as per this purge. However, there have been some who have had concerns about Tumblr as a platform for a while, and not even in terms of what is posted, but in terms of plans for it. In 2013, the platform was sold to Yahoo for $1.1 billion. While some were excited as they felt this connoted what the company's true value was, others were concerned because this meant that Tumblr was no longer an independent archive and instead was going to have to start playing by some very different rules. Some claim that they can see a shift in the way that things were monitored from that moment on. Others not so much. However, one thing is clear, Tumblr has not been doing well financially for a while. Indeed, in 2016, some numbers were revealed that made it seem that Yahoo did not have much confidence in it at all. Indeed, in 2016, Yahoo began writing down the social platform's value in the amount of the hundreds of millions. This led those who were financially inclined to believe that Yahoo viewed the company as worthless, or at the very least as not profitable and not necessarily the best investment. At the same time, while all of that was occurring, Tumblr was beginning to garner a very different reputation than the one it had when it first began. While still viewed as a haven by many who utilized it, on the outside, people were beginning to look at it very differently. Some were beginning to view Tumblr as this odd, deviant space for people who were posting all kinds of odd and inappropriate material. This was not aided by an increase in online news reporting, which was quick to point out whenever Tumblr had a scandal, of which it had quite a few, from issues of self-harm, eating disorder blogs, copyright issues, security threats, changes in how one can remove comments, and more, making some users wary about ever starting to use the site. And on the inside, there began to be more and more skirmishes. There are some who view Tumblr as inherently toxic, and this is of course a result of how quickly things can escalate on there, and how fractured the communities can actually be. Flame wars, ship wars, and more recently discourse wars can grow to epic proportions because of how quickly participants can fire back and forth. And as a result, for some who are on the inside, Tumblr has not felt like a safe space for quite a while. It's very easy for people to find themselves piled upon, especially if one doesn't have the popular opinion or finds themselves in the wrong side of Tumblr. Indeed, there are certain users who have found ways to weaponize Tumblr's tagging system, and this can even include spamming not safe for work images as a weapon towards those who have made it explicitly clear that they do not wish to receive them. Attacking ships, attacking artists, attacking authors who they do not like. In short, there are some who felt that Tumblr had a lot of problems before this purge was even announced. However, on the whole, there are many who felt that this was a very important space for fandom, and despite all of its problems, it very much was a safe space. Particularly for more progressive fans, as it has gone on, Tumblr has garnered garnered a more and more progressive user base in general. However, it must again be reiterated that people can have very different experiences on Tumblr. While it is massive, it is not exactly centralized. Because of that, there are people who can be on Tumblr and have absolutely no knowledge of some of the things happening within their very same fandom. If they are not, for example, say using the correct tag or the popular tag, or if they so much as don't log on for a week, or aren't in communication with other people who use the platform regularly. It is very easy to fall out of the loop on Tumblr. As a result, two Tumblr users in the same fandom can have completely different outlooks on what the Tumblr experience is like. As a result, there are many who felt that Tumblr needed to change, that something had to give to try and bring it back to the type of space that people felt it was in its glory days. Whether or not it ever was as wonderful as people thought is something to be debated. Despite how difficult it is to control, Tumblr has always endeavored to have very strict guidelines, which tended to evolve alongside the site as necessary, though there are users who claim that there has been illegal activity on Tumblr for years that has been reported, but nothing has been done about it. Indeed, as mentioned, it already had a zero-tolerance policy against certain types of porn, and a reporting system that people could utilize, as there have been people who have been rightly or wrongly driven off the platform by people reporting them. So what exactly changed? What set off this purge? Well, firstly, we must define what exactly a purge is. A purge is simply a mass deletion of a certain type of content from a hosting archive. It has in the past often targeted fan content. It usually targets explicit, queer, or violent content. When it comes to targeting queer content, that is not always on purpose, although in some of the purges of the past it has been. Some argue that it will be the result of this current purge, whether it is intended to be or not. So when it comes to the 2018 Tumblr purge, there have been a couple of shakeups around Tumblr recently regarding porn. Tumblr, because of its general welcoming atmosphere, or at least what fans perceive to be a general welcoming atmosphere, housed a lot of not safe for work content that was spread across a variety of different avenues. You had educational content, where people would educate about sex, gender, their sexual experiences, anatomy, a whole wide range of stuff. You had actual sex workers who were on there using the platform for commissions and other kinds of work-related endeavors. You also had a wide array of artists, from those creating original art to those creating fan art, some on a range of explicitness, from tasteful nudes to actual sexual acts. You also had written erotica. This could be original fiction, actual life experiences being shared, or again, fan fiction. All of these served a diverse audience. However, it must be noted that there are some who have felt for a long time that it should not be on the platform at all. There is still a very large prudish streak out there that does not feel that this kind of content deserves to be depicted or that it needs to be housed somewhere else. It is here that one will most likely encounter the arguments that state that this purge is very much akin to censorship, while others counter that as a private institution, really the platform can ban who they like. This seems to be a sentiment shared by the current Tumblr CEO, as evidenced by this statement. There are no shortage of sites on the internet that feature adult content. We will leave it to them and focus our efforts on creating the most welcoming environment possible for our community. Posting anything that is harmful to minors, including child pornography, is abhorrent and has no place in our community. We've always had and always will have a zero-tolerance policy for this type of content. Now, you may have noticed that within that statement there were mentions of child porn. So why is that? Well, the first change people noticed was a change in linking that occurred about a month ago, and this followed an incident wherein a user found that there had been a porn link posted underneath one of their posts, and they found it humorous and shared it. This was picked up by the media, who did not seem to find it as humorous as the original user, and indeed made the assertion that Tumblr may perhaps be a dangerous and lascivious platform. All of this came to a head on November 16th when the app was pulled from the iOS App Store. This was apparently after reports that there had been content found that was dangerous to children. Now, for those who are unaware, being an app in the Apple iOS store is very important, especially for any online site at the time of this recording. The mass majority of usage and views when it comes to interacting with online content has shifted to people's phones. As a result, if one is not accessible, then they are losing a lot of profit. And this happens to line up with two of the reasons that purges tend to happen. Purges historically have happened for two reasons, usually. Sometimes there are others, but these are the two dominant ones. The number one reason is aligning with the current perceptions of morality, making sure it does not seem that one site is somehow deviant or inappropriate or in needs of being outright deleted. The urgency of this goes up if one site has had a history of problems, such as Tumblr has. The second is monetary gain. In Tumblr, these two have aligned perfectly. For Tumblr very much needs the App Store in order to keep going, as it has already been proven that it is not the most profitable venture. As a result, it cannot take as many risks as some other apps may be able to afford. As a result, this crackdown is now being presented through the lenses of cracking down on child porn. Now, this is of course a very important endeavor and must in no way be minimized, but that does not mean discussion surrounding this issue should stop. It has been pointed out by not only users but critics that other apps have found a way to do this without outright banning adult content, and that this seems to be a very extreme response, one that is affecting creators across the board, whether they create not safe for work content or not, and also seems to ignore the fact that the vast majority of not safe for work content on the site is not of an illegal variety. This response is probably rooted again in the perceptions of what Tumblr is and what fandom is. It is quite clear that this purge will affect a lot of fandom content, especially because a lot of not safe for work content, particularly art, had found a home on Tumblr. There are other art hosting archives, but say for example DeviantArt, which is another large one, has certain filters that prevent one from getting too explicit and block things with more finality than Tumblr did. Now this again ties back into how people view adult content and whether they feel that there is any value in it or not. Some feel that removing child porn supersedes everything and that any of the benefits that not safe for work material could provide do not matter. So let us examine this a bit. What exactly are the supposed benefits of not safe for work art, fics, and material? Let us stick to the fandom realm and we will leave education to the side, for one can make a very compelling argument for why it is important to be educated about certain sexual things. There's a lot more questions around not safe for work fan content, as some find that it should not exist at all. Indeed, some feel that it is just weird. Why are people doing it? Why are they attached to these characters in this way? What benefit is it gaining anybody? Some feel that people simply have the right to express themselves how they see fit, and that sexual expression should be allowed, and that there is nothing wrong with wanting to explore one's sexuality with characters with which they are familiar, or indeed just simply present titillating images for everybody to enjoy how they see fit, be it that they find them well drawn, or be it that they engage with them in some kind of sexual way, and that there is nothing wrong with this kind of recreational sexuality. Others feel that it provides an actual safe space to be able to discover one's sexuality and explore these taboo topics, and perhaps have conversations with others about topics that they may not be able to discuss in real life, or just have an outlet for some of these urges. Tumblr in particular also has a unique argument attached to it, in that lots of the art was very diverse. You would find not safe for work art and fics about all kinds of races, genders, body types. That is something that cannot be found across all archives, and some feel that it's a real shame that a lot of it will be destroyed, as for some it could have been a very safe way to explore not only say their sexualities, but also perhaps to feel valid, beautiful, wanted, and that in general we should be moving towards being more open about these kind of topics and not towards being repressed, as that can lead to a lot of unhealthy behaviors, and some feel more unhealthy behaviors than being exposed to it. Of course, there is the crux of the argument, as some feel that these things are far too open, and that once one begins to fall down this kind of deviance hole, it becomes easier and easier to go further and further and further. Also, some believe that there cannot be a distinction between thought and action, and that if one engages in some kind of, say, kinky or deviant material by reading about it or looking at it, they will be forced to recreate it in real life. This is an area of ongoing study, and you can find things to support both. And Tumblr does appear to have some catalog instances of causing some harm. However, needless to say, how one feels about sexuality, the expression of it, especially through the use of fictional characters, as well as Tumblr's overall atmosphere, will affect how they view these purges. It must also sadly be noted that removing all not safe for work content will probably not remove all of the child porn from Tumblr, for not all child porn or child grooming material is explicitly sexual, so there are still things that may indeed slip through the filter. So some feel that all of these things being banned will not have the exact effect that the company is hoping for, and instead that this is a clear appeasement tactic. However, this purge is unique, for unlike mass deletions of the past, people are talking about this one and has garnered a lot of attention, and people also have other social media platforms to go to and vent their frustrations and share their concerns. Some concerns are that this is going to stifle fan creators, particularly queer creators, that is going to ruin Tumblr, and ruin all of fandom. So let's address these one at a time. Unfortunately, many creators already felt stifled on Tumblr. As mentioned, many fan creators had begun to find Tumblr to be very toxic and had stopped posting works there. However, this has definitely exacerbated the process, particularly as some have already had their blogs deleted. This is of course incredibly disheartening for a creator, as it feels that absolutely no value has been assigned to something that they have put so much effort into, and in some cases has actually been helping them earn a livelihood. It can be an absolutely devastating occurrence, and it will definitely change how certain creators interact with not only fandom but online sites in the future. It can be argued that that is a necessary line of thinking in this era of the internet. The internet is no longer the wild wild west as it was once called, and while it is a public platform, that does not mean that one actually has ownership over the sites which they are visiting. As a result, it is sadly always important to remember to back up one's content or have somebody else do it for you, as these sites are not the bastions of permanence that many think that they are. As to whether or not this will ruin Tumblr, it must be reiterated that it will for certain users, but not for everybody. As mentioned in the beginning of this video, there are people who are using Tumblr very differently. Indeed, there are some who never venture into the not safe for work parts. As a result, for them, it will feel as if nothing has changed. And newer people who come to the site will come up under these new regulations, and so it will change how they interact with it and what kind of content they create, hence curating a new audience. There are some who will of course stay away based on their principles and the fact that they feel that this site should be open to all, as they have heard that it once was. However, there are others who simply will not care. And of course, those who are not focused on fan-created content or not safe for work content and instead are producing other types of blogs will most likely continue to use Tumblr, as they have a very different experience with it. So whether or not Tumblr will die remains to be seen, as some feel that Tumblr's reputation as a not safe for work space precedes it, and that in actuality there's not as much explicit material on the site as people seem to think. The last true stats for the amount of not safe for work material were done in 2012, this being an analysis done by TechCrunch, which showed that 22% of all traffic in and out of Tumblr could be classified as porn, and that 16.45% of blogs on Tumblr exclusively cater to that kind of material. However, post the acquisition by Yahoo, those numbers seem to have tapered off. A research study in 2016 showcased that only 1% of users were producing not safe for work content, but 22% of users were consuming it. This from a sample size of 130 million Tumblr users. So while Tumblr has a reputation for being a site that people seek out for this kind of material, and for some it certainly is, the question remains to what extent. As the site is purged and as creators leave, then it will be easier to glean how much of an effect this content has on the platform, and how much of it was an appeal or draw for users. However, one assertion is 100% not true. It will not ruin fandom. For some, Tumblr is the majority of their fandom experience, and so it is understandable that it feels like this could be the end of fandom. However, as we have talked about a lot on this channel, Tumblr is not all fandom, even if it can at times be perceived as such. Also by the mainstream media, which tends to assume that that is where all fandom activity occurs. It is not. Fandom existed before the digital era and was able to organize. Fandom rose through the rise of the internet. Fandom has survived multiple purges before this one, and it will survive this. In fact, for those who are feeling especially disheartened, let me share with you a story about the rise of an archive of our own. An archive of our own was founded in 2008, just a year after Tumblr. However, it had a very different mission statement. Indeed, ironically, an archive of our own was recently very maligned on Tumblr when it was doing its most recent pledge drive for funds. For an archive of our own was created largely in response to the purges that were occurring on other fandom websites, specifically LiveJournal and fanfiction.net. It was created as a haven, a place where people could post anything, and a place that would have intricate tagging systems so people could look for what they wanted, and if they didn't want to find something, they didn't have to, but if they did, it was right there. And also to keep a record of fandom. An archive of our own is considered by many to be the best fandom website when it comes to fanfiction, and an example of what many fandom sites could and should be. The point? This arose out of the ashes of all of the purges wherein so many fan creators lost everything. There were people after those first purges who also never created again. There were people who lost all of their content, most of it explicit, a lot of it queer content as well. All of this is to say that fandom is not over. Fandom survives. If Tumblr is indeed over for this type of content, and if the appeals process doesn't work out, if it simply becomes too stringent and certain content is no longer allowed there and it doesn't repeal this decision, then a new archive will arise. It might not happen right away, but it will definitely happen, for there is demand for this kind of content. And the demand comes from a wide array of different types of fans looking for it for different reasons. As a result, it will find its own space again. That is probably not very comforting for those who have already lost material, be it something they were actually working on or something that they were looking at. However, it is simply to say that it is not the end. And also a reminder that the internet and its sites are not permanent. These digital spaces are not the safest for housing one's creations. Always make sure that one has a place that they are keeping them, for yourself and for others, in case the need to repost ever arises. On the flip side, some feel that this is going to fix Tumblr and give it a better reputation, despite all of the articles currently critiquing the decision. There are some who think that Tumblr will be better for this, and some who think it will be worse. What do you guys think? Have you been affected by these purges? Has it altered how you can look for and search for fan content? There are many different types of fandom outings that are now going to have to find new spaces to host themselves. Whole projects, endeavors, people's livelihoods put on hold. What are your thoughts about not safe for work material? Do you feel that it doesn't have a place on archives like this? And if so, why? Do you think that their goal of actually eliminating child porn off of all of Tumblr will be successful because of this ban? Do you think that it will be fairly implemented? And are you a fan of Tumblr in general? What is your experience with it? Because there are many people who have had issues with it long before this, and many people who feel that it is the best fandom experience they have ever had. Share all of your thoughts down below. I want to hear about your Tumblr experiences. Tumblr has long been such a fascinating, polarizing platform, and purges can always be so horrifying for creators. For some, this may indeed be the first purge they have ever experienced, which can add to the terror of it. And of course, there are the more cynical out there, who even if they haven't gone through one before, feel that one should always be prepared for such an eventuality. Where do you fall? There's a lot to talk about, so answer what you can and what you want, and you know the drill, numbered if you can, because I expect many essay comments with this video. As always, we can articulate many different ideas together and keep it a respectful place for discussion, for that is what this channel is all about, discussing all kinds of different happenings in fandom. There is often the assumption during these purges that all content that is deleted deserves to be deleted, and while some content definitely goes beyond the pale and is worthy of deletion, that is most times not the majority when it comes to purges like this. There's a lot to unpack here, so I will leave you with it. There are of course many more videos coming soon, so if you haven't already, please do subscribe and hit the bell notifications so that you never miss a vid. We have more upbeat topics coming soon, and I will see you then, and until then, let's get to the outro. Bye-bye. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to all of my patrons, names on the side, for helping to make these videos possible. There are, as always, more videos coming soon, so until then, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.